I stopped watering half my garden for an entire month to see what would actually happen. One bed got regular water, the other? Just mulch and hope. 30 days later, the results shocked me. Some plants thrived while others became unrecognizable, and the lessons I learned changed how I think about drought gardening forever. The setup. Here's what most gardening guides won't tell you. Plant survival during drought isn't just about luck. I set up 2 identical raised beds in my backyard, each measuring 4 by 8 feet. Both had the same soil mix, equal amounts of compost worked in, and identical plant selections. The lineup included tomatoes, peppers, lettuce, carrots, beans, and a few herbs like basil and oregano. Nothing fancy, just your typical vegetable garden varieties. The difference? One bed would receive my usual watering schedule, about an inch of water per week. The other bed got a thick 3-inch layer of wood chip mulch spread evenly across the surface, then absolutely nothing else. No water, no attention, no cheating with a quick sprinkle when things look desperate. Why mulch? Because if any unwatered plants were going to survive, they'd need every advantage possible. Mulch acts like a protective blanket, reducing soil evaporation by up to 70%. It keeps soil temperatures cooler during hot days and warmer during cool nights. Plus, it prevents that crusty surface layer that forms when soil dries out completely. I started this experiment in early June, when temperatures averaged around 85 degrees, not the hottest month, but warm enough to create real stress. The soil moisture was identical in both beds at the start, measured with a simple moisture meter at about 60% saturation. Both beds face south, getting full sun for at least 8 hours daily. Everything was documented with photos every 3 days, soil temperature readings, and notes on any visible changes. The stage was set for 1 month of abandonment. Week 1. The early signs. Day 3 brought the first surprise, though not the one I expected. The mulched bed actually looked better than I anticipated. While the watered bed had moist, dark soil visible between plants, the mulch completely hid what was happening underneath. I pulled back a corner to check and found the soil surface still slightly damp. The watered bed's exposed soil was already starting to crack in spots between waterings. By day 5, subtle differences emerged. The lettuce in both beds stood upright and green, but if you looked closely, the unwatered lettuce leaves weren't quite as perky. They'd lost that crisp snap when touched. The tomato plants showed no stress yet in either bed, pushing out new growth and flower buds right on schedule. Temperature readings told an interesting story. At 2 inches deep, the mulched bed's soil registered 72 degrees, while the watered bed hit 81 degrees during peak afternoon sun. That 9-degree difference meant less moisture evaporating from below, even without water being added. The herbs were the first real indicator of what was coming. Basil in the unwatered bed started showing slightly darker green leaves by day 7, a defense mechanism where plants produce more chlorophyll to maximize photosynthesis with limited resources. The watered basil stayed its usual bright, cheerful green. Root vegetables like carrots showed nothing above ground yet, since most of their energy goes below the surface. Peppers looked identical in both beds, their thick leaves designed to handle heat stress naturally. Week 1 ended with both beds looking surprisingly similar to casual observers, but the cellular level stress had already begun. The real test was just starting. Week 2, the struggle begins. Everything changed around day 10, when the plants couldn't hide their thirst anymore. The lettuce in the unwatered bed started the dramatic decline first. Those outer leaves that were just slightly less crisp. Now they were wilting by mid-afternoon, trying to conserve water by reducing their surface area. By day 12, several leaves had turned yellow and papery. The watered lettuce, meanwhile, was ready for harvest, crisp and beautifully full. Tomato plants revealed their stress through their leaves. In the morning, both beds looked similar, but by 2 in the afternoon, the unwatered tomatoes had leaves curling inward at the edges. This isn't permanent damage yet, just the plant's way of reducing water loss through transpiration. When temperatures cooled at night, the leaves would relax again, but each day this cycle repeated, the plants spent more energy on survival than growth. The beans told perhaps the most dramatic story. In the watered bed, they'd climbed their stakes and were flowering. In the unwatered bed, growth had essentially stopped. No new leaves emerged, and the existing ones developed a dull, greyish-green colour, instead of that vibrant bean plant green we associate with healthy growth. Here's where the mulch magic became visible. I pulled it back to check and found the top 2 inches of soil were dry, but below that there was still some moisture. In the watered bed, without mulch, even with regular watering, the soil was only moist in the top 3 inches because the rest had drained through or evaporated. The peppers remained surprisingly unbothered. Their thick, waxy leaves are evolved for exactly this kind of stress. Week 3. Critical point. By day 18, I honestly considered ending the experiment early because some plants looked beyond saving. The lettuce was done, completely crispy, brown, and collapsed into itself like forgotten salad left in the sun. I pulled one plant up, and the roots were still alive, surprisingly. But the above-ground portion was finished. The watered lettuce had already been harvested and replaced with a second planting that was thriving. Tomatoes entered what I call the desperation phase. The unwatered plants had dropped their lowest leaves entirely, redirecting every bit of available moisture to the growing tips. Flower buds that had formed in week 1 never opened. They just dried up and fell off. Growth had stopped completely. The watered tomatoes were now 18 inches taller with fruit beginning to set. Basil made its final stand around day 20. Those dark green leaves from week 2 had turned almost purple-black, and the stems were woody and tough. When plants can't get water, they sometimes trigger early flowering to produce seeds before dying, ensuring the next generation survives. That's exactly what happened here. Tiny flower spikes emerged, and within 3 days, the plant looked more like a dried herb bundle than a living thing. But here's the fascinating part. The carrots and peppers were still hanging on. I carefully dug around one carrot without pulling it up, and the root had grown deeper than usual, searching for moisture below the dry surface layer. The mulch had kept just enough moisture in the lower soil levels to sustain deep-rooted plants. Oregano, being a Mediterranean herb adapted to dry conditions, looked stressed but alive. Its leaves were smaller and greyer, but it hadn't given up. Drop a comment and tell me how long you've accidentally left your garden without water and what survived. Week 4, the final verdict. Day 30 arrived, and the difference between the 2 beds was almost comical if it weren't so educational. The watered bed looked like a garden catalogue photo. Tomatoes heavy with fruit, peppers flowering, beans climbing everywhere, and the soil dark and rich. Total harvest so far, 3 pounds of beans, 2 heads of lettuce, and numerous herbs. Everything was lush and exactly what you'd expect from a well-maintained garden. The unwatered bed looked like a disaster movie set. The lettuce area was just empty soil with brown remnants. Tomato plants were half their normal size with yellowed leaves clinging to the top third of each plant. Beans had stopped at about 12 inches tall, their leaves still attached but lifeless. The basil was a skeleton of its former self. But the survivors told the more interesting story. I pulled the carrots, and while they were smaller than ideal, they were actually edible. Not pretty, not competition-worthy, but real carrots that had developed despite 30 days without water. The root depth on these was nearly 8 inches, compared to the 5-inch roots on watered carrots. Peppers had lost about 40% of their leaves, but the remaining ones were thick and healthy. 2 small peppers had even started developing, though they'd likely never reach full size without water resuming. The plants weren't thriving, but they weren't dead either. Oregano looked rough but was still photosynthesizing. Those tough Mediterranean genetics meant it could probably go another 2 weeks without water if needed. The final soil check revealed something crucial. Beneath the mulch, at 6 inches deep, the soil still held about 15% moisture. The science behind survival. Understanding why some plants made it while others failed comes down to 3 critical factors working together. Mulch proved itself as the MVP of drought survival. That 3-inch layer reduced surface evaporation so dramatically that it essentially bought the plants an extra 2 weeks of moisture. Without it, the soil would have been bone dry within 10 days. The mulch also kept soil temperatures 15 to 20 degrees cooler during peak sun, which meant less water evaporating from below and less heat stress on shallow roots. Soil quality mattered more than I expected. The compost I'd mixed in months earlier acted like tiny sponges, holding moisture in pockets throughout the soil profile. Clay particles in the soil also helped retain water, though they made it harder for roots to access. Sandy soils would have been catastrophic in this experiment because water would have drained straight through with nothing to hold it. Root depth became the ultimate survival predictor. Shallow-rooted plants like lettuce and basil, with roots only 4 to 6 inches deep, hit dry soil quickly and had nowhere else to go. They died. Deep-rooted vegetables like carrots and peppers, which naturally send roots down 12 to 18 inches, could access moisture that lingered in lower soil levels. They survived. Plant biology played a role too. Peppers and tomatoes are technically perennials in their native environments, evolved to survive seasonal dry periods. Lettuce is an annual that completes its life cycle quickly, with no evolutionary pressure to develop drought tolerance. Mediterranean herbs like oregano evolved in climates with dry summers, so 30 days without water is uncomfortable, but not fatal. The combination of these factors determined who lived and who became compost. Lessons for your garden. This experiment wasn't just about watching plants suffer, it taught me practical strategies that'll change how I garden going forward. First, mulch everything. Seriously, every garden bed should have at least 2 to 3 inches of organic mulch covering the soil surface. Wood chips, straw, shredded leaves, whatever you have access to. The difference in moisture retention is massive. Even with regular watering, mulched beds need watering half as often as bare soil. That's less work, less water waste, and healthier plants overall. Choose your plants strategically if you live in drought-prone areas or travel frequently. Mediterranean herbs like rosemary, thyme, oregano, and sage can handle neglect. Peppers and tomatoes, while they prefer consistent water, won't immediately die during dry spells. Root vegetables with deep systems like carrots, parsnips, and beets have better survival odds than shallow-rooted greens. Lettuce, basil, beans, and cucumbers need consistent moisture, period. If you can't water regularly, skip these entirely or group them together in one bed where you can focus your limited watering efforts. Don't spread thirsty plants throughout your garden. Soil preparation matters before you even plant. Work in compost or organic matter to at least 12 inches deep. This improves water retention dramatically and gives roots reason to grow deeper where moisture lingers longer. Clay amendments help sandy soils hold water, while sand or perlite helps clay soils drain properly. Water deeply but less frequently rather than shallow watering daily. This encourages roots to grow down instead of staying near the surface. A plant with 8-inch roots will outlast a plant with 4-inch roots every single time when drought hits. Consider installing drip irrigation or soaker hoses on timers if you're gone frequently. Even minimal automated watering beats complete abandonment. After 30 days, the verdict is clear. Some plants can survive serious neglect with the right preparation, but most gardens need consistent attention. Mulch saves lives, root depth determines survival, and choosing drought-tolerant varieties matters more than we think. Your garden's resilience starts with understanding these simple truths.
If you found value in this video, you're going to love this next one.